My name is Ellery Vaughn, and on the morning my younger brother was promoted to commander of the Atlantic Tactical Fleet, I stood outside the main gate of Fort Bellwether, uninvited, unacknowledged, and entirely expected to stay that way. The sun hit the parade ground in clean angles, catching brass buttons and white gloves as guests filed in through the arches. I stayed in the shadow of the gatehouse hands in the pockets of my civilian coat, eyes tracking the flow of people like I didn't belong to any of them. Technically, I didn't. A young officer with a tablet scanned the list, tapping like he hoped my name might materialize if he hit the screen hard enough. "You're not on the guest list, ma'am," he said finally. Tone-clipped practiced. I nodded once. "That's all right," I replied. It wasn't. Inside the gate, I saw my parents smiling and waving camera ready. I watched as my brother strode toward them in his full dress, whites, all polished metals, and precise posture. He leaned toward his wife, murmured just loud enough for me to hear Ellery forgot to RSVP. Still thinks protocol bends for her. I said nothing. Then a black government SUV rolled to a stop beside me. Slowly, deliberately, the rear window lowered. Inside sat a man with silver hair and command in his eyes. He glanced at the young officer, then said simply, "Stand down, Lieutenant. She's not on your list because her clearance outranks yours." And just like that, the world tilted. I wasn't surprised they left me off the list. That was the thing about being erased gradually. You stopped expecting to be seen. It started small years before the ceremony. Not with cruelty, but omission. Like the way my name would get skipped when people talked about the Vaughn legacy. Like the way my mother always introduced Nathan as our future Admiral and me as the one who likes books. Nathan was the golden one from the beginning. Broad shoulders by 16, a born speaker, easy in his skin. He looked like he belonged in a uniform before he'd even tried one on. Our father used to stand behind him at the mirror, correcting his salute, straightening imaginary medals. When I asked to try, Dad smiled faintly and said, "That's more your brother's thing." I still remember the day I won the National Cadet Strategy Games. I was 14, the youngest in my division. I came home with a certificate and a brass pin, and my mother said, "That's nice, honey," without looking up from the dinner she was plating for Nathan. He had just passed his physical exam with distinction. He got a cake. I got an empty seat. That's not to say they were cruel. No one screamed. No one told me I was nothing. They just never saw me as something. I learned early to go quiet. I stopped trying to compete. I graduated early, applied to the Naval Academy without announcing it. No one asked where I was going after high school anyway. At Annapolis, I kept to intelligence, not command. I liked systems more than spotlights. I liked patterns and pressure points. My instructors described me as non-disruptive but highly effective. That was a compliment, I think. After graduation, I moved into black assignments, classified units, cyber warfare, modeling hybrid threat simulations. Most of the time, I wasn't allowed to say where I was. The rest of the time, no one asked. Nathan became the face of the family. Every holiday card, every dinner toast, every framed photo on our parents' wall featured him in uniform. They called him Commander Vaughn years before he earned the title. And me, I became the sister who went off and did something with computers. Even when I made Lieutenant Commander before 30, I got a single-word reply to the promotion notice I forwarded congrats. No one knew when I moved to the Joint Analysis Division. No one called when I was posted to CENTCOM's Red Team. No one cared that I'd rewritten risk doctrines used in every major Pacific simulation. They thought I'd left the Navy altogether. But I hadn't left. I had just disappeared on their terms. And that morning, standing outside the gate in gray wool, my stars hidden beneath civilian cloth, I had no intention of explaining myself. Not anymore. There's a particular silence that follows you when even your own family forgets to ask where you've been. For 12 years, I served in rooms without windows, where the walls buzzed slightly with encrypted tension, and the clocks didn't track daylight, but threat cycles. I learned to think sideways to trace digital footprints, buried beneath layers of misdirection, to detect war before it was declared. I was stationed in Bahrain when Nathan got his first ship command. I watched the announcement online, my parents grinning in a photo, beside him a slice of cake in hand again. I sent a quiet congratulations. No reply. When I came stateside and took a posting at Quantico's counter-adversarial division, I used to drive past their neighborhood on Sundays, engine idle at the corner. I'd watch the lights in their kitchen flicker on. Sometimes I saw Nathan's SUV in the driveway, his youngest kid running in the front yard. But I never pulled in. There was never a reason to. Once I left a birthday gift for my mother on the porch, a hand-painted teacup from a Turkish craftsman she used to love. I didn't sign the note. A week later, I saw it listed on Facebook Marketplace with the caption, "Unwanted gift. Never used." That stung more than I thought it would, but I still kept showing up where it mattered. When a drone protocol failed in the Black Sea Theater, I was the one who restructured the risk tree. When a communications hub went dark in Djibouti, my call tree plan restored secure channels in under 3 minutes. I once rerouted an entire fleet's deployment vector during a false flag simulation because I saw the metadata didn't line up with source behavior. None of that made it into any family Christmas letter. I didn't need a headline, but I guess I hoped for acknowledgement. The worst wasn't that they didn't know. It was that they didn't wonder. I became a ghost in my own history, a blur in the margins, and Nathan, without malice but full of certainty, filled in the space they'd left for a legacy. He never asked what I did. He never reached out. In his mind, I think I had chosen obscurity, chosen irrelevance. In truth, I had chosen duty. I had chosen necessity. And they had chosen not to see it. By the time the promotion ceremony came, I had already been briefed into 3 joint task forces. I was the architect behind a hybrid infiltration model currently used in 6 major commands. I'd just finished coordinating a crisis simulation that made its way redacted into the president's daily brief. But none of that changed what happened at the gate. To them, I was still the quiet sister, the one who didn't RSVP, the one who drifted off into some vaguely technical career. They didn't know who I had become, but they were about to. I didn't wear my uniform that morning. I wore a long gray coat collar, turned up hands buried in the pockets. Underneath the dark navy dress, blues weighted pressed silent unread. My stars stayed hidden, not out of shame, but precision. Timing mattered. The officer at the gate, young polite barely shaving, tapped his screen again. Hopeful maybe my name had just been misspelled. It hadn't. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not cleared for the ceremony," he repeated, eyes flicking toward the crowd beyond the gate. "The Vaughn family guest list didn't include you." I nodded, expression calm. Understood. Behind him, the grand parade grounds opened wide. White folding chairs aligned in perfect formation, flags posted at every interval, families gathering like it was a holiday. Somewhere among them, my mother adjusted her pearl necklace, likely critiquing someone's shoes. My father, upright in his old uniform, waited for the moment he'd be introduced as the father of Commander Nathan Vaughn. And Nathan, he arrived last, of course. Always knowing how to make an entrance. Medals gleaming, handshake ready. He passed close enough to see me, then leaned toward his wife with a half-smile I recognized too well. "Ellery forgot to RSVP," he said, not caring if I heard. "Still thinks protocol works differently for her." I didn't react, not outwardly. Then came the SUV. It didn't rush. It didn't blast sirens or flash credentials. It simply pulled up beside me and idled. The back window eased down with the soft authority of something well-practiced. "Lieutenant," came a low voice from inside, directed at the gate officer. "Stand down." The young man blinked. "Sir, she's not on your list," the voice continued, "because her clearance outranks yours." Out stepped Admiral Emmerich Hale. Steel gray hair, eyes like drawn lines, posture that quieted entire rooms. He didn't nod at me as an old friend. He didn't smile in nostalgia. He extended his hand, not in greeting but in recognition. "Vice Admiral Vaughn," he said with just enough volume to carry. "Glad you made it. We were starting to wonder if you'd skip your brother's big day." The air changed. People near the gate paused mid-step. The officer holding the clipboard went pale. Behind the fence, a ripple passed through the guests. Heads turning, whispers starting. Someone gasped. I unbuttoned the coat. The navy fabric beneath caught the sun. My silver stars glinted sharp and undeniable. I didn't rush. I didn't announce. I let them see. Admiral Hale stepped beside me. "Shall we?" We walked together through the gate past the officer, who now stood like a man witnessing a tectonic shift. Inside, the atmosphere felt warped, stretched. Officers glanced up and immediately stepped aside. A few saluted without thinking. A few simply stared. One photographer raised his camera instinctively, then lowered it, startled recognizing the insignia and unsure if he had permission to capture it. It wasn't Nathan's stars they saw. It was mine. I felt the eyes before I found the faces, my mother's lips parted mid-whisper, my father's hand tightening on the program, and Nathan standing at the edge of the stage, blinking like he'd walked into someone else's spotlight. He leaned again toward his wife, whispered something shorter this time. She turned, and when she saw me, really saw me, her mouth opened slightly. But she didn't speak. No one did. Because there I was. And this time, no one could pretend I wasn't. The band began to play as we reached the front row. Admiral Hale gestured toward an empty chair with a reserved placard far left directly across from the stage. A junior officer, startled, stood up immediately, not because he recognized me, but because Hale gave the slightest nod. I sat without hesitation. Not in rebellion, not in defiance, but in complete earned authority. The fabric of my coat folded softly across my lap. My shoulders stayed square eyes forward, not bothering to glance behind me. If they wanted to know whether I was still there, they'd have to look. The ceremony proceeded with the crisp precision I'd come to expect from naval formality. Opening remarks were delivered, honors were bestowed, unit commendations and color guard transitions unfolded like choreography, and I barely heard a word. My focus narrowed not on the speeches, but the shift. I could feel it in the air, a subtle recalibration. Whispers trickled across rows behind me. She outranks the Admiral on deck. Who is she? Did you see the stars? And from the corner of my eye, Nathan kept glancing, not often, just enough to confirm the impossible, just enough to remind himself it was real. His posture never broke, he was too well trained, but his jaw tightened every few minutes. I knew that tick. He'd had it since he was 10. He clenched when things veered off script. This ceremony had never included me in his version of the story. But now I was impossible to cut out. Then came his name. Commander Nathan Vaughn, front and center. Applause followed polite and proud. He stood every inch the officer they had expected him to become confident, composed the heir to a legacy no one had questioned. He received his medal, shook hands with precision, saluted exactly as required. Then he stepped to the podium. His smile was thinner now. I'm honored, he began, voice carrying clearly, to accept this promotion on behalf of every mentor, peer, and officer who taught me what the chain of command truly means. He went on to thank his unit, his leadership, his family, his wife for her strength, my mother for her elegance, my father for his discipline. Then he paused, just a second too long, and looked up. His eyes met mine. Only for a moment, but in that flicker, I saw it all, the unraveling, the recalibration, the quiet collapse of a narrative he'd believed for years, the realization that I hadn't vanished. I'd simply grown beyond their lines of sight. He swallowed and looked away. And to all those who served before me and beside me, thank you for your sacrifice. No mention of me, no name. But it didn't matter, because my presence had already spoken. And when the applause followed, it wasn't just for him anymore. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled onto the reception lawn, like a champagne bottle, uncorked, bright, restless clinking with politeness. Families clustered for photos. Officers shook hands. Music floated from somewhere behind the temporary tents. I didn't move from the perimeter. Old habits die quietly. I waited. And he came. Nathan approached without escort, no photographer trailing him this time. Just him still in full dress, but no longer looking like the center of anything. His expression was unsure, not humbled, not defensive, just unsettled, like someone realizing the story he'd memorized didn't match the one playing out around him. He stopped a few feet away. Admiral Vaughn, he said with formality that felt too tight in his throat. I returned the nod. Commander. He tried a smile, but it didn't stick. I didn't know you were still in, he said after a beat. No one told me. I met his gaze. Still relevant, still existing. His jaw tightened, then relaxed. I thought you left after Annapolis. You never said anything. You never asked. That landed, not as a wound, but as a weight. He shifted his stance, hands sliding into his pockets like he didn't know where to put them. You could have told us. I took a breath, not out of anger, but clarity. You had a version of me that worked. Quiet, civilian, easy to overlook. I let you keep it, That was my mistake. He blinked, eyes narrowing, not in argument, but recognition. You always hated the spotlight. I didn't hate it. I just never needed it. But don't confuse silence for absence. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he broke it, voice softer, more uncertain. Why now? Why show up today? I glanced toward the flag still fluttering above the stage. The crowd had thinned, but the music still lingered faintly. Because it was time, I said. Because the truth doesn't need permission. His mouth parted slightly. Something flickered behind his eyes. Then he asked cautiously, the operation last year in the Gulf, the one that rerouted our carrier mid-mission, that intel, that wasn't from Fleet Command. No, I said simply. That was me. He exhaled. Slow, real. You saved lives. I did my job. He looked down, then back up, and this time when he spoke, it wasn't clipped or awkward. Thank you. I nodded. For a second, we just stood there. Not as rivals. Not as family, even. Just two people on opposite ends of the same history meeting in a cleared space for the first time. Then he stepped back and offered a sharp practice salute. But this one wasn't for show. It was real. Weighted. I returned it measured and steady. And I turned to leave, not triumphant, not bitter, just whole. Because for the first time, the silence wasn't hiding me anymore. It was clearing the way. 3 days later, a text arrived from my mother. Just 5 words. Sunday at 6. Just us. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a request. But it was the first time in over a decade she'd sent a message without a holiday or obligation attached to it. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time I didn't need the invitation. I just chose to accept it. The house looked exactly the same when I pulled into the driveway. Brick siding freshly scrubbed, flag still crisply raised, hedges trimmed like nothing had shifted inside, but everything had. Nathan answered the door. No uniform this time, just sleeves rolled up and a dish towel slung over his shoulder like he belonged in the kitchen. He gave a small smile. You're on time. You're early, I replied, and we both smiled, something quieter between us now. Inside, the scent of rosemary chicken filled the air. My mother moved between the dining room and the stove like she always had, efficient, meticulous, but for the first time, she wasn't directing anyone. She wasn't adjusting forks or correcting napkins. She just moved. My father stood when I entered. Not with formality, not stiffly. He didn't salute. He didn't speak, not right away. He just reached out his hand. Welcome home, Admiral, he said, voice low, throat thick. The words settled in the room like a weight that had waited years to land. Dinner was quiet, but not strained. We talked logistics, drills. My mother asked about command structures, not to impress me, but because she wanted to understand. No one brought up the ceremony, no one needed to. But after dessert, a peach cobbler just like she used to make when Nathan made rank, my father set down his fork. The scrape against the plate was deliberate, slow. You'll be the highest-ranking Vaughn in 4 generations, he said, eyes fixed on me. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He added quieter. Now you didn't inherit that. You built it, and I was wrong not to see it. Across the table, my mother reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold, but steady. We were all wrong, she said, barely above a whisper. But we see it now. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time there was no polish in her eyes, no performance, just a truth that had waited too long to be named. Nathan raised his glass. To the sister who rewrote the standard, no one corrected him. We finished the meal in peace, not trying to fix the past, just letting the truth sit with us for once, not in the shadows, but at the table. A month later, I stood alone in front of a frosted glass door at the Pentagon. The plaque beside it read Vice Admiral Ellery Vaughn, Director, Pacific Cyber Operations Command. The hallway was quiet, sterile, humming faintly with fluorescent confidence. Inside, my name no longer traveled by whisper or clearance level. It started meetings. It signed directives. It reshaped strategy. 2 weeks into the role, I briefed the president directly. No slides, no filters. 34 minutes, clean sharp. When I finished, the room didn't applaud. It just listened. You're not just anticipating, the Secretary of Defense said. You're redesigning how anticipation works. And I just nodded. Not out of modesty, but finality, because I knew I had earned it. That evening, I walked the naval yard alone. Lights shimmered across the water, bouncing off the steel silhouettes of destroyers anchored nearby. My phone buzzed. Nathan. A photo. Me in uniform on a newly printed recruitment banner outside our old high school. Eyes forward, silver stars gleaming, captioned earned, not inherited. He followed with a message. They're quoting you now. You're not just a story, Elle. You're a signal. I stood there for a long time watching the wind ripple across the river. I thought of all the years I'd been quiet, all the rooms I'd entered unseen, all the ways I was told to wait to dim to step aside. And now I replied simply, then let's make sure it leads somewhere worth following, because I hadn't fought for their table. I had built my own and left the door open for whoever came next.